Hi and welcome to Bytes and Bits. If you do a lot of gaming, it's important to have a good quality game controller. So the people at GameSir have sent me across one of their new G7HE game controllers to have a bit of a play with. Now this controller here, it boasts Hall effect sensors for its analog controls, so that's for both the joysticks and the triggers. And then it uses microswitches for the various buttons. So that should give it a good quality premium feel. Now this one retails at around about £40 to £50 or $40 to $50. So it is sort of at the top end of the game controller market. So let's have a look at what we get and if it's actually worth the money. So if we open up the box then, so get inside here. We'll find we have the actual controller itself. So if I just take the stuff out of here. So we have our controller. And in the box we get some stickers. We get a manual. And we get a 1-month Xbox Games Pass. And of course we have our USB-C cable. So those are really the important things that we need to get this device up and running. So let's have a look at the actual controller itself then. So this controller does retail for between sort of £40 and £50, depending on where you're going to buy it from. And I think dollar-wise it's pretty much the same, so $40 to $50. So it would be sort of classed as a fairly premium device. So we are expecting it then to be a fairly premium feel to it. First impressions, the weight of it is pretty much ideal actually. It's not too light, it's not too heavy. It just feels nice in the hand. It feels sort of chunky enough, but not too heavy or anything like that. The grip itself, we do have a textured area here on both grips. So where your palms are sitting and your fingers are fitting, that really does add to the security of it. It feels very sort of nice in the hand. It's not going to move around or slip or slide as you play your games. Button wise, one of the big selling points for this, of course, is that it has micro switches for a number of buttons. So if I click this button here, hopefully you can hear that clicking away. So these actually do have proper micro switches behind them. Quite a lot of these joysticks use PCB pads, and as you press the button down, it sort of squeezes a conductive material between the pads to make the connection, and that's where you get quite a spongy feel on the sort of lower quality buttons, where these here are really good. They're very positive, and you really do know if you are pressing it or not. So that's a real bonus on here, and again, one of the selling points for this device. The D-pad itself then, again, that has got little push buttons behind them. I don't think those are micro switches, but again, if you can hopefully hear that just sort of clicking through. I do play a lot of retro games, so things like Pac-Man and Donkey Kong, where you do need sort of like a 4-way joystick. And this D-pad here, I do find is about one of the best I've seen for that particular function. It gives you a very positive directional feel on here. And again, some other games that I play with it, the diagonals again are very easy to do as well. So a very good D-pad, again, from my point of view. The other controls then, again, are shoulder buttons. Those are, again, on little push buttons, but they do have a nice feel to them, very positive. And the analog controls are very smooth actually. I do like the feel for these. They do feel very high quality. And again, one of the selling aspects of this is that the analog controls, so both joysticks and the shoulder or trigger buttons, are all using Hall effect switches or Hall effect sensors. And again, I'll talk more about what that means in a second, but it does mean that these are going to give you much better control over time. They aren't going to degrade over time. And again, I'll explain why that is in a second. Other features of it then, again, we do have some media control. So there's a little M button here. We hold that in, and we then have volume control on our D-pad, and then our in-game voice chat control as well on there. On the back, we do have a headset jack plug here. So if you want to connect up a wired headset, you can just plug it in here. So you have everything just running off a single USB cable. And we do have our microphone mute button there as well. So if we look at the back of the device, we'll actually find there are 2 extra buttons on here. Now these are mappable buttons for the controller. So what this allows you to do is to map one of the buttons on the front, one of the main buttons, to either of these buttons down here. So you can have 2 extra buttons down the bottom, which will mimic something up here. So say you wanted to have an extra fire button down below, you could map this button to your A button. So when you press this button underneath, it will in fact press the A button. And again, any combination of those factors. So that's pretty much all the aspects on the controller itself. Again, there are a couple of other buttons here which help us set it up and calibrate it and so on. But again, I'll take you through that in a second as well. So overall then, I am really pleased, to be honest, with the feel of this controller. I already have had a go at playing with it, and it does feel really good to play. Again, I'm not a massive expert on gaming, so obviously I'm doing it just from a general sort of being able to use it and how it feels in a game. And I think from what I have at the moment, sort of original Xbox controllers and other sort of other third-party Xbox controllers, I would say this is probably the best one I have at the moment. So I'm very, very pleased with that. But let's have a look more then at the actual features of this and why it would be classed then as a premium product and why you are paying slightly more for it. And then, of course, how it plays in games. So let's first look at the idea then of these Hall effect sensors and why those are better and why they are on this premium device. And again, you'll find a lot of the more premium devices these days are using these Hall effect sensors for their analog controls. So let's find out a bit more about that. So if we first have a look at how a normal potentiometer-based controller works. So the potentiometer is effectively a little variable resistor, and that's what is inside the actual joystick controller when you move the joysticks around. And what's really happening is that we are creating what's known as a potential divider. So it's very much similar to this little preset potentiometer that I have here. So basically, we have 2 terminals which we apply power to, so 5 volts to one end, 0 volts to the other. And this one there, you can just about see underneath this metal bit, there's a little carbon track there. And that carbon track is a resistor or resistive material. So between this terminal and this terminal, we have 1 kilo ohm of resistance. What we then have is a slider here. So you can see that the point of the slider here is actually touching against that carbon track. And what this allows us to do then is that little slider there, as it moves around, in effect what it's doing is it's taking this full track of 1K and dividing it into 2 resistors. So a resistance from here to this point and resistance from here to this point. And that gives us our potential divider. And that will take our 5 volt power supply, divide it up into 2 parts and give us a center voltage which will change as we move the potentiometer around. And that's what's happening. So as you move your joystick, in effect what you're doing is moving this little slider across a carbon track, and that gives a varying voltage then back to your computer, which tells it which position your potentiometer is in. Now, of course, the problem with these is that this little slider is physically moving and dragging across this carbon track. So eventually, as you use the joystick more and more, that carbon track starts to get worn away. And that causes it then to start to give you varying readings. So as certain bits of it get worn, the resistance changes, and that's where things like your joystick drift come into play, where perhaps, although it's in the center position here, it's not actually registering as a center anymore because there's wear and tear on the carbon itself. So in our Hall effect sensor, what we're doing is we're taking a little joystick. This is sort of like just a little separate joystick sensor here. And as you can see, if you look at this little bit here, that's the actual potentiometer. And as you can see, as I move the joystick, we have a little center point here which is moving, and that's the actual slider rubbing against the carbon. What we're going to do is we're going to replace this resistance-based sensor with a magnetic sensor, and we'll effectively have a little magnet like one of these. These are from another project where we can actually turn one of these sensors into a Hall effect sensor. But we basically put a magnet on that rotating part. And as we rotate the joystick, that magnet will rotate and then allow us to sense the position of it using magnetic induction. And that will then, we can translate that sensor position into a voltage, which can then be fed back to our PC to give us our joystick position. But of course, the upshot of that then is that there are no wearing parts as regards the actual sensor. So that wear and tear of the wiper rubbing against the carbon track is removed with simply this magnetic induction process. So obviously all of the other mechanical parts of the joystick, the knob and the springs and so on like that, are as they ever were. But the actual sensing part and the voltage we're getting back out of this sensor is not going to vary over time. It's a much more reliable process. As we're using Hall effect sensors for the joysticks and the triggers, they do need to be calibrated the very first time that you use the device. So to do that, we simply hold down the 3 buttons at the top here. So our menu button, our view button, and our Xbox button. And then we connect it to our computer. Now what we should find then is, once we get that in, is that our white indicator light here starts flashing. And that means that we are in calibration mode. So first off, we need to tell it where the 0 positions are. So none of our sensors are being touched. We press the A button. The white light goes out. And what we now do is we now cycle all of the controls. So our trigger buttons, in and out. And then our joysticks, just simply give them a full range of motion. Once we've done that, we press our A button. Our white light comes on and our joystick is now calibrated. Now, we do need to, after we do that calibration process, unplug it, and then we can then re-plug it back into our computer. And at this point, our device is now ready to use. So once we've got our device calibrated, if we have a look at its properties then in Windows, we should see that everything is working correctly. So all of our controls and our buttons are all doing what they should do. Now, one of the nice features of this device as well, this gamepad, is that on the back here we have 2 extra buttons, and these are mappable. So what we can do here is, if we want to map, we can map any of the buttons on the actual controller and duplicate them with these 2 buttons as well. So if I want to map this L4 button to something, what I do is I hold in the M button, I then press in the L4 button, and we should then get our indicator flashing. And then if I want to map that to, say, the left D-pad, I would just simply click on that. And then that is now mapped. So if I look at my properties window, I should find that I have my left D-pad there. But if I also click the L4 button, that also then is mapped to that same button. So I can have 2 extra buttons, which are quite easy to get to down the bottom here, which I can map to any other function that I want to. So that is really the device itself. So let's see what it's like in actual gameplay. So for the gameplay, I've actually enlisted the help of my son, who actually plays games that were written after 1990, unlike myself. So he's a lot better, of course, at these controller games than I am. And he found the controller to be a really good quality one. He said it felt really good in the hand. He was able to use all of the controls really nicely, like the buttons. He wasn't massively keen on the buttons at the back, and we actually mapped those in the end to do nothing. He felt that sometimes he was hitting those by accident and causing various things to happen when he didn't want them to happen. So again, personal choice here, but again, he put them into doing nothing. As regards the usage of the game controller, I don't think he was able to sort of say whether it made his gameplay better or anything like that, but he said it was a really good experience using it. So I think that generally gives us a bit of a thumbs up from him. As I said, for me, the D-pad control is an important aspect. And really, in the games that I was playing there, where I needed either the 4-way control or the 8-way control, it performed fantastically well. So I was really, really pleased with that. On these sorts of games as well, some of them have multiple fire buttons, so the actual mapping of those back buttons was really handy here, where I could have my thumb on a fire button and then use my index finger underneath to fire the second bombing button in this game, Xavius here. So I find those actually really useful in some of these games. So that pretty much wraps it up for this video. So overall then, this GameSir G7HE, I am really pleased with it, and thank you very much to GameSir for sending that across to me, and I'll be carrying on using this in my gameplay. If you do want to buy one of these, I'll put some links down in the description below, and you can head across there and get one for yourself. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please do click that like button and subscribe to the channel for lots more gaming and modding and electronics and making projects. I look forward to seeing you again very soon, and bye for now. For more games programming, electronics projects and retro gaming, please make sure you like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel and visit my website.